this is the gadget. Okay. So you can see I'm prevaricating already because it was supposed to be designed for mobile as a dead end. And you know when you promise you'll do a talk, you know, and as the day approaches and you think, oh shit, I'm supposed to be doing a talk, and you look at the topic that you said you were going to talk about, and Joe has sent you an email saying, I hope you're going to say something positive and provide some solutions, you know? And you think, well, I'm not too sure about that. And I realized I had a bit of anxiety about this talk. And it came to about 4 o'clock this morning. I woke up and I dreamed that this presentation was on in 20 minutes. and I was half an hour away, and I hadn't written anything, and I was trying to get my shoes on, you know? But at least I wasn't naked, so. So I've changed this to a dead-end mobile question mark, and if Joe had allowed me to change it even further, I would have said, is working in mobile a dead end? And you know, I'm not here to say bad things about mobiles. I tried to count up the number of mobile phones I've had, and I got as far as about 17. So I don't know how many phones people have had in general, but it's an interesting exercise to sort of count back. And I can count back so far that there was a time when there were no mobile phones. So I remember a mobile phone when it was the first thing, you know, it was just amazing. And I now have a Pixel 3, which I like a lot. And several of the phones I've had, I've loved, and I'm as attached to my phone as anyone else here. So I'm not here to just say mobile phones are rubbish. However, you know, things are changing pretty fast, and I think sometimes we overestimate. We kind of see the mobile phone as the pinnacle of development. It's something that we've achieved as a species, and it's our high point. And I think that's kind of incorrect. Now, when we talk about the future and think about future developments in technology, it's always there's always you know, I have a little graph in my head, and one of it is societal, economic, and environmental collapse, and that seems to be reasonably likely at the moment. And the other one is that we continue to progress as a technologically sophisticated species. And I guess today is predicated on the assumption that the latter is true, that we are going to proceed, but I'm not entirely confident about that. Sometimes events occur. I mean, this could have been any politician, really, because most of them, you know, are in the habit of doing things like bringing in lumps of coal into Parliament. Rather than dwell on that, though, I'll move ahead from that one. And this slide is supposed to be blank. Joe emailed me about this earlier and said, do you realize slide number 3 is blank? I thought, what? Surely not. My mother-in-law told me a story, a UX story, although she didn't classify it as such. And it's always stuck with me. It's about a man who goes to get a suit made up. And he goes to a tailor, and he's talking to the tailor, and they look at various bolts of wool, and they pick out a beautiful piece of cloth, an absolutely magnificent piece of cloth. And he decides he'll have a suit made out of that. And the tailor says, okay, let me measure you up. And he measures the guy up, and he says, come back in 2 weeks, you'll have a magnificent suit. So the guy goes away, and he comes back in 2 weeks, and there's a suit, and it is just stunning. Absolutely beautiful. The cloth is fantastic. The lining is lovely. The stitching is invisible. It's absolutely magnificent suit. And he puts the jacket on, and it doesn't quite fit, you know. And he says, look, it doesn't fit. And the tailor says, look, just kind of do that, and it'll be fine. So he does that, and it's fine. And he tries on the trousers, and one leg is a bit longer than the other, and it's a bit skewed. And the tailor says, well, just turn that leg a little bit and sort of hitch up your knee. And true enough, you know, it is, I can't remember which shoulder I was at. Anyway, it is really beautiful like that. And he leaves the shop, and he walks down the street. And he passes the two proverbial elderly ladies walking in the other direction. And one of the elderly ladies turns to the other and says, look at that poor man. And the other elderly lady says, yes, but what a beautiful suit. Now, that to me is the ultimate UX story, because that's kind of what we design a lot of the time. And I took this photo the other day. I'll name drop. I was at UX Hong Kong with Dano and Joe. So I just took that photo at random and think, you look at those poor people, but what beautiful phones. And I wonder what they're doing. What are they doing, those people? Situational blindness. But, I mean, are they all conversing? They're not conversing with each other, presumably. And I don't think they're together. Martin Tomich, in his book, Making Cities Smarter, quotes Martin Duvall, talking about people creating or composing their own city. I thought it was a really nice idea, the fact that you're on your mobile phone and you're in the city, or you're in wherever you happen to be, but you're overlaying on top of it another city that's your own city, and the one that you're sharing with your peers. And it's an absolutely fantastic idea, isn't it, that we have, through this amazingly versatile medium and the ability to communicate, we can overlay a completely different reality on top of the one that we're on. And he talks, I think, about sitting outside the State Library in Victoria and watching people, overlaying, not being with the other people they're with, or not being actually in the city, but creating their own virtual city on top of it. And the mobile phone has been a fantastic device for doing that sort of thing. There's great power and attraction. I think there are certain things that the mobile phone does par excellence beyond anything else. And of course, I think it was Don Norman who said that communication is the killer app. No matter what technology you're talking about, that's the ability to communicate, which is what we do as humans, is always going to be the killer app, and it's going to be the thing that's going to make you money if that's what you're out to do. And these people presumably are communicating with others on their way to wherever it is that they're going. But the mobile phone it's like one of those organic things. When you're critiquing a website, and the way UX people love to critique stuff. Like I got this lapel mic, and when you turn it on, it's green, and when you turn it off, it's red. And I thought, no, bad usability, bad. But we tend to. Where was I going with that? UX people critiquing things. It's gone. It'll come back to me. I want to do a little thought experiment. Well, actually, never mind, it wasn't good enough anyway. I want to do a little thought experiment. So imagine it's 1990-something. So the iPhone came out in 2007. Imagine it's 1990-something. And we're trying to invent a service or an ecosystem that will enable people to access all the information, features, and functions that we know are coming down the track with this new internet that's come online recently. So we can see that we're going to have GPS, we're going to have access to devices all over the world at our fingertips. How are we going to create an ecosystem or a service that's going to exploit that and give us access to those things? So if we thought about doing that, and we had our Post-it notes on our whiteboards or whatever, and we were doing a little bit of a co-design, I wonder what sort of system we'd come up with. I don't have the answer to that because I haven't done that particular experiment. But I don't think what we'd say is, let's shrink a computer and a telephone and put them in a tiny little handheld device and then cram them full of apps. That's not the solution to the problem of dealing with this ecosystem. But that's in effect what we've done. And to go back to the thing that I'd forgotten about earlier, I was thinking about critiquing a website. We often say a website or a service has grown organically. We say somebody built something, and then they had to add something on that wasn't foreseen, so they just tack it on. They tack on something else and something else and something else. And eventually it becomes unwieldy because it's just suffered from this organic growth. I think that's what's happened with the mobile, and we take it for granted that there's another app, another app, another app, another app. And I went to my Google Play Store to my library to try and find out how many apps I had. And I started to count, and quite honestly, I gave up. It was just too hard. I don't have that kind of attention span anyway. But I did take a screen grab of some of my apps, and this is the letters M to Q, and it's about, I don't know, some number 40 or something like that. So I've got hundreds of apps here. Now, most apps get used for a few days, and the vast majority of apps are not used at all after the first 10 or 20 days. And we never get around to deleting them. And some of the apps you use once, and some of them you use a couple of times, some of them you use every day. But what a waste of a resource in some ways that we've got this super intelligent, highly sophisticated device sitting in our pocket, idle almost the entire time. And every now and again we want to do something really clever like point it at an airplane and find out what flight number that is, or find out where Saturn is. And we can do these incredible things with it. But most of the time it's sitting there idle, and the apps are not efficient, and the phone itself is not efficient. Something's checking for updates here. I guess I can ignore that. So back to our ecosystem. I guess if you think about what sort of characteristics we might say if we were designing the ecosystem, I would think we would come up with some of these terms. Ubiquitous, and I guess the mobile phone really is ubiquitous, even though everyone has to have one themselves. I mean, this ecosystem has to be ubiquitous. It has to be robust. I'm not sure whether it's robust or not. The latest phone I've got, I put one of those otter cases on it because all the last phones I've had lasted a maximum of a year before they were absolutely munged, and I had to replace them. So robust, yeah, maybe. Affordable, in this room, yes, affordable. And even nowadays, probably affordable for the majority of people on the planet, which is quite an achievement. Extensible, that's arguable, I think, because we don't really have, I mean, the apps are you're just piling more and more stuff into a box, aren't you? And you say, I need to get something, let's pull that thing out of the box and use it for a particular feature and then put it back, for a particular moment or purpose and put it back in again. Context sensitive, I think clearly they're not context sensitive. If you look like at something like distracted driving, that's a classic example of the fact that the mobile phone is indeed far from context sensitive. In some ways, it's got some sensitivity, like it knows where you are. It knows you're outside a McDonald's and says you can get such and such, 10% off. And of course, that's what the marketing people love, that sort of ability to push more advertisements to you depending on where you happen to be at a particular time. But it's not really context sensitive. And there's a great book called, what is it called? Can't remember. It's about distracted driving and a person who killed 2 rocket engineers in Utah by Matt Rickelt. And it's an absolutely fascinating book about the distraction caused by mobile phones, why that distraction happens, the sort of neurology of it, and the effects on society. And Werner Herzog also has a movie about it, about texting and driving and the consequences, and it's called something about text in seconds or something about seconds. It's really worth looking at. Personalizable, our phones are personalizable to an extent. Secure, whether our phone is secure or not, it's certainly an element of security and is typically used in 2-factor authentication. I don't know whether we'd really call them secure. Multimodal is something that's lacking. I mean, our phone really is something that we look at. Okay, we can hear it as well. There's a little bit of haptics, and some of the accessibility work is really excellent, where you can, actually, if you're not sighted, you can still drive the phone by the buttons and the hotspots responding to your finger. I think, we could be much more multimodal. We could introduce olfactory senses. So when you're on Tinder or something and you're swiping, you can get the pheromones of the person that you're looking at will also come through. Unobtrusive, that's arguable. Private, to an extent. Intelligent, not really. I mean, it's not really helping us, the phone. We build in agents of various sorts into it, but the phone itself is not intelligent enough to help us. Device independent, it's not its device. It's a specific device, although it's better than it used to be. I mean, certainly 10 years ago, you had to design for multiple screens, multiple formats. Now it's really down to Android and iOS, which is pretty good. Learnable to an extent. I think it's difficult, particularly for older people, to deal with the multiplicity of apps they're expected to use on a phone. Authoritative. I don't believe phones are particularly authoritative. And user-centered. Is this ecosystem really user-centered? Is it meeting our needs as humans? Is it helping us to expand our horizons? Is it doing those sorts of things? To some extent it may be, but I think a lot of the time it's not. And I think that's the sort of ecosystem that we really should have tried to design had we had the ability to go back in time and do it. We're already breaking out of the box. I guess everyone here has at least one Alexa and one Google Home at home. Would that be true to say? Who has an Alexa or a Google Home at home? Wow, that's a minority. And is this the IxDA? Isn't this like... Come on, guys. It's about the only tax break you can get is buying this sort of gadgetry. How many people have got a smart fridge? No, nobody would admit to that anyway, right? But a lot of the functionality that was on the phone is now breaking out of the phone and moving into other places. Google Home, Alexa, Cortana, Siri. We always give our assistants female names. Clearly that's a sexist reason. Although probably somebody would rationalize it by saying that females are going to be more reliable and authoritative, and if we let blokes do it, then they'll fuck everything up and lose things. But it's really interesting, I think, how the intelligent agents are always given female names. It's a real symptom of where we are, I think, as a society. And these devices or services enhance or in some cases supplant the mobile phone. And these are the sorts of devices or services that we probably end up working within. I think working with voice is really interesting. It's a fascinating modality, and it's much, much more efficient for certain activities or certain actions or functions than the mobile phone is. I personally find that I talk my texts a lot of the time, and I got in the habit of not correcting them, as a matter of principle, and I'd send these completely unintelligible texts. Today, actually, I sat down and I went through my Alexa history and my Google history, and because if you don't turn it off, it's actually recording all of the things that you said to it. And I didn't have to scroll down very far before I found some swear words. And I also found, to my embarrassment, Google Play ABBA. And I know that I never have given it that instruction, but it's amazing the stuff that it remembers. And we've got an Alexa and a Google side by side, and the main difference, I think, is that Google is slightly less useless. Although some people swear by them. And look, voice is interesting. You can, when you're drunk and you're sitting around at the dinner table, there's an argument. So what's the population of Venezuela? And Google says, huh? What? But we don't have an ecosystem, do we? We've got all this. We've got this Internet of Things growing up organically around us, but we don't have an ecosystem. Somebody was tweeting today from this account, Internet of Shit. I don't know if you've ever seen that Twitter account. It's really one worth following. And obviously, it's someone who's got a rather cynical view of the Internet of Things. And his retweet, I think it's a bloke from memory, he retweeted this guy, George Kettenberg, who has to download a software update for his shoes. But subsequent to this, this is happening, right? This is the world we live in, So Nike have these new shoes, and they're self-lacing, right? They've got presumably a battery in them, and they lace themselves. But apparently, Android app bricks them, so you end up with these shoes that you can't lace or unlace because the Android app hasn't been tested properly. And this is just a funny example, but this is sort of stuff we face all the time of these things just not being connected. And I know that nobody here is working for the bank that did this, but a lot of the banks are doing it. Like we've got bank effortlessly using your voice. Wow. Access your account balance, recent spending history, and reward point status through Alexa, Amazon's new voice service that instantly connects you to music, your smart home devices, and now your personal banking. Has anybody used voice for personal banking? Macquarie would never do that sort of stuff. No. But I mean, it's the new technology. And whenever a new technology comes along, we have to play with it and use it, even though there's not really something to solve for it. So I've actually used this on my Alexa, not with this particular bank, but some other particular bank, I think, or maybe it's that bank, can't remember. Anyway, you have to go to your app on your phone and then install a skill for Alexa to be able to use that bank. So you can say, hey, Alexa, I want to use this bank. And I said, what do you want to do? I want to know how much is in my account. You think, well, that's completely pointless. That's the stuff that a mobile phone is really good for. I mean, a quick lookup of something, give me the information. So we don't have an ecosystem. We've got all these devices that are clever. I mean, you can imagine having a really good, sophisticated ecosystem that's built into the world around you, where, for example, if you're walking and you're looking for directions, instead of having to hold your phone like this, lights on buildings and things that you walk past would direct you to go in the right area. I mean, we could have, and we will have, presumably, a much richer ecosystem. But if we don't connect things up properly, it's just going to be, it really is going to be Internet of shit, unfortunately. But this is an interesting area to work in. And whenever there's something new that is shit, this is where interaction design and UX design has an opportunity to go in there and make things a lot better. Because we know that people are not going to buy gadgets for the sake of it for very, very long. They'll buy it, and then they won't use it because it sucks. And then let's get in some UX designers, let's get in some interaction designers, and let's make the thing work, because there is a huge amount of opportunity in these sorts of areas. And lots of opportunity for accessibility, which is fantastic. There's a great article in the New York Times today, actually, or yesterday, about Microsoft and their accessible controllers. Did anyone see that article? They're really, really interesting, the sorts of things that are going on in that sort of space as well. One of the things about mobile phone is that it's a proxy for identity. And this is Australia Post's digital ID. Has anyone used it? It's okay. Yeah, well, I use it too, so I'll put my hand up as well. But I set it up for work reasons, and then I had to pick up a package at my post office, and I went down, and they said, have you got any ID? And I said, I've got my Australia Post digital ID. And I said, nah, it's no good. Have you got your driver's license? So that was a bit disappointing, but anyway, that's the way it goes sometimes. That's a bit harsh. I mean, they didn't, anyway, it's a long story. But we have our cards on our phone. It always seems weird to me that, like, I've got several credit cards on this phone, and you can have your Opal card on your phone. You can have your MyKey on your phone, except it won't work, because we're from Melbourne, But you put all these cards on the phone. The phone is a proxy for you. It's a proxy for your ID, but that doesn't have to be on your phone. Well, it could be on you can just leave it on the card. You can put it on your watch. There's all sorts of devices that you can put it on. So the phone as a proxy for identity is interesting, but we don't need a phone for identity. We're getting now so sophisticated. The facial recognition is exceedingly good, and facial recognition by machines is better than facial recognition by humans. So machines have a lower failure rate in recognizing a person than people do in recognizing a person when you're looking to validate identity. So that's a really interesting space to be in. And you think, well, okay, are we going to go there? Do we want to actually allow the ecosystem around us to surveil us to the extent? I mean, we get some benefits, right? If we can walk in somewhere And we don't have to drag stuff out of our pockets and make sure our phone is charged and fire up Google Pay or Apple Pay or whatever, or, do the thing with the watch. If the system can recognize us and we can say, yeah, I want to buy this thing, and it does it for you. It knows who you are and it debits the appropriate account without you having to worry about it. That's very convenient, right? And we know that convenience tends to be an overpowering motivation for people. Years ago, the Dead Kennedys had an album called Give Me Convenience or Give Me Death. And I always think that's a very, very true of the way that we behave. There's another musical quote here from the Neville Brothers. We give up a few freedoms here and there in the name of a squeaky clean America. And that song is probably 20 years old, but it really rings true to me. A few freedoms here and there. We say, we'll allow you access to your bank accounts. That's a big thing coming down the track now is open banking data, where you'll be able to give a third party your logons for your other banks, and they'll be able to aggregate the information from your banks and do things with them. In order to apply for a loan, you'll need to do these sorts of things of giving access. And some people are really quite comfortable with it. I mean, it happens already in a lot of cases. And other times people say, well, hang on a minute, I want to craft my own story about who I am. I don't want to tell the bank everything. But we're getting to the stage where the amount of surveillance that we're willing to undergo for convenience trumps that ability to tell our own story. And the story is told by the ecosystem and the power base that we live within. That sounds kind of paranoid, doesn't it? One of the things that I think that I look forward to is offloading my workload to my intelligent agent. So, we have an agent that does these things for you. So instead of trying to figure out what's the best electricity deal, what's the best deal I can get on a mortgage, what movies will I like, what songs should I listen to, we could have an agent that would do these things for us. And I think the world of intelligent agents is interesting. One of the big problems, of course, of the intelligent agent is who paid for it. Who pays for that agent? If we're not going to pay for it because information is supposed to be free, then somebody is going to use it, is going to monetize it in some way. So if you're wealthy, you'll be able to afford a good intelligent agent. If you're not wealthy, you'll be able to afford a shitty one. I don't know what happens in that particular circumstance. Somebody wrote an interesting article in the communications of the ACM last week called How Hippies Destroyed the Internet. And I was talking about the whole concept that information is free meant that we never had the ability to monetize the internet in a way that enabled us to have the price visible. And as a result, we've sold our privacy instead, and we're selling our data to people. And that's, I mean, it was a tongue-in-cheek title, obviously. And I was a hippie myself, so I don't agree with it. But, these are the trade-offs that we make. The threat of AI, I think, for people working in mobile is an interesting one. I don't mean in the Elon Musk existential threat to the planet type of thing. But there's a lot of things that we do when designing for mobile, particularly at the UI end of things, that one could imagine offloading to a machine. I mean, machines create things with patterns very, very well. If we can tell a machine, these are the things, these are the data sets that we require, this is the information we need to get from these people, this is the information we need to present back, then you could offload that to a machine that would go create the UI, even test it automatically online for you using one of the various tools out there, and tweak it until the results come up pretty well. I don't see that as being unrealistic. I think that's something we will have to face as a profession in the not too distant future. One of the things that I had at the start of this talk when I proposed it to Joe was, can we hook up all the machines and go down the beach? That's kind of been an ambition of mine for a long time. Is one day the machines will be good enough, we'll hook them all up and we'll all just chill out and relax. And that's the beach that I want to be on. But I think there's still work to be done. There's a lot of work to be done in interaction design. There's a lot of work to be done, but I think we will need to move away from mobile. I think many of us working in mobile now will start to work with things that are outside that ecosystem. I think the upside of it is there's just more stuff. Like people who've moved from, say, working on character-based user interfaces to graphical user interfaces and then to mobiles. It really is just more stuff, and the key thing is being able to do the good user research, build and prototype stuff, get the type of feedback we need to design our new machines in the new age. But I think we will see a demotion of the mobile phone as a device. Thank you.
Thanks, Gerry. Oh no, there's where I put my beer. Right. Questions for Gerry?
Thank you. That was really thought-provoking. Question for you about just the devices are fairly homogenous, but the capability using the device is quite diverse. So how does that actually work itself out. Share any of your thoughts?
I mean, I guess that's the beauty of the mobile, isn't it? It is the genuine multi-function device. But I just think I just feel that a lot of the functionality can be offloaded to other places and will be offloaded in the future. I don't think that addresses your question, does it? Can you rephrase it to me so I can understand it better?
So if you think about right now, we have multiple generations coming into the workforce, and millennials are going to take over baby boomers and Gen X. And so what is the real standard of capability, and does it matter, you know, different age groups, different diversity groups, different, you know, what is that foundational level of competence and expertise to proactively control and own the technology solution?
Are you talking about expertise among the people developing the technology solution?
No, just users.
Using it.
Yep.
Look, I don't know. I mean, there's a huge differential, and people always used to say it was age-based, and you say, well, somebody is such and such an age, and therefore they can't do these things, or they won't do these things. In my research, and I do quite a lot of user research, I don't see age as being the prime differentiator anymore. You know, and the people who are digital natives are, you know, just as incompetent a lot of the time as the people who are not. In fact, I think we should have more Luddites. I mean, I think we should start a pro-Luddite movement, because whenever I hear the term Luddite, I think, hang on a minute, the Luddites were people who were protecting their, you know, their livelihood against the unreasoned invasion of a technology that was imposed upon them. Sorry, that's a bit of a rant. But I don't think it's a generational thing. I mean, people come in. I guess we do talk about making things simple, and there's a point at which you say, if we make it so simple, then nobody can fix it when it goes wrong. I think we've passed that stage a long time ago, though. Right? Very few of us in this room would have any idea how a mobile phone works, for example. I mean, you plug it in, it communicates with a cell tower, but what's it actually doing? You know, what do we know about the protocols underneath it? What do we know about the chipset underneath it? Unless we're really technically proficient, we don't know that stuff. And again, that's not answering your question either. Sorry. Okay.
Hi. It was a great speech. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's more of a statement, but I just noticed that was an article recently about restaurants starting to ban the use of cell phones.
Yeah.
So I think there is sort of like a surgence of people just not really wanting that interaction of just singular and wanting people to really interact with people. So technology will probably follow the same suit when there's that little niche area of people that just don't want that to happen anymore.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, and I think you know, the whole addiction thing in mobiles is really, really interesting. I mean, people talk about being addicted to mobile. No one's addicted to the mobile, but we are creating apps and interactions that are quite addictive. And Nir Eyal's book called Hooked, How to Create Addictive Products, I thought was very, you know, very, very dark. You know, how we're actually expert at doing this sort of thing. And the companies, the gaming industry and gambling industry is really, really expert at getting to people, you know, pre-mobile phone, but now with the mobile phone, it's been weaponized, and giving people the ability to come back. And I think we do need to step away a little bit and take control of our own lives. But it's hard. I mean, the mobile phone, you know, it's the first thing in the morning, it's the last thing at night, middle of the night, 4 a.m. when you wake up in a cold sweat, get the phone out.
Just curious on your take on the new folding.
Well, you know, I was thinking about that because 2 years ago, Apple had a phone that folded, but it wasn't supposed to, you know. I haven't seen the folding phone. I mean, it just seems like more stuff, you know. I mean, I've never had a huge desire for it.
Like as a concept.
I have no idea. I'm sorry, I really don't. What do you think it'll change anything?
Me personally,
Yeah.
not so much. I think people are consuming content, not creating very much.
Yeah.
It might open the door to more people creating, but
Yeah. Well, is the idea that it's big enough that you can use as a tablet, like basically?
That's exactly right. Yeah, it becomes a tablet as well.
Yeah.
But it's not really good at either.
Yeah, there you go. And how easy is it to break? I mean, if I had one, I know for sure I'd sit in it, you know, and I'd also fall it the wrong way at some point. So that's going to be a key question, I think. Thank you.
You remember 3D TVs?
Yeah.
Me? Okay, so I guess our mobile phones have consolidated a lot of our devices, like cameras, your diary, your GPS and whatnot. So are you kind of suggesting that it's going to diversify again? and break apart from what we carry in our pockets?
I feel like it might. I think something like a diary, to me, a mobile phone doesn't handle a lot of the diarizing functions really well. I mean, to me, the best way to do a diary would be to speak to something. Now, whether that happens to be my mobile phone or happens to be my Google or my Alexa device, there's no reason why it can't be externalized and externalized in a way that does it better. Some things I think we're going to do on the mobile because it's better on the mobile. But I think a lot of things we could do, we could either obviate completely by having intelligent agents. I mean, chatbots also are hugely successful. I don't want to sort of diversify into that, but I think intelligent agents are going to make a big difference, and we don't necessarily have to interact with them. I mean, it feels like the mobile phone to me is this tiny little portal. Like there's a huge world out there, but we have to go through this tiny little portal to get at it. Yeah. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So, but I can't predict, especially the future, as somebody said.
Hi. Maybe continue with your question and your answer. While you were talking, I was thinking, well, are we understanding mobile as a concept of human activity or actually as a device, or both, right?
Yeah.
So personally, I don't believe the mobile device is dead per se, because we are mobile. So as a concept, we'll still keep moving and we'll still keep doing things out there. As you say, you wake up, the first thing that you do is you grab your mobile phone, but eventually it might not be a mobile phone, but it will be something else that will allow you to move around and still do the many things that you want to do, because for some stupid reason, we're convinced that we have to keep doing all the time. So maybe the question is whether the device in itself is doomed or the actual concept. I don't think it's the concept. I think it might be the device, and it might end up being a shift of relevance. The mobile phone itself might not be the core of activity as it is today, which was 10 years ago, it was the laptop. 20 years ago, it was the computer. In 10 years' time, might be your wristband, whatever it is.
Yeah, I think there's clearly a need or a demand, at least, for a mobile device. And in Star Trek, they still have communicators in the future, so obviously we're still going to have them. But it's interesting you both mentioned cameras. I mean, when I buy a phone now, I mean, I actually calling it a phone is kind of weird, because particularly if you're under about 25, you don't actually use it for phone. Have you ever seen a kid use a phone for a phone call? What's wrong with that kid? But the camera is really, really important. So when I buy a new phone, I'm really buying a camera that I can put apps on, which is kind of weird. But yeah, I do think I think you're absolutely right. There is a continuing need and demand for mobile phones. I just think we're going to offload a lot of the functionality either to back-end intelligence or to external devices. And I think that's the exciting thing for working in design in general, in the technology design field. There's going to be all these fantastic devices out there, sensors and health applications and all the different things we're going to do outside of the mobile phone to some extent.
Have we hit peak question? The first time we've had dead Kennedys from a hippie, I think.
Ex-hippie.
Thank you very much, Gerry.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Thank you.